All right, everybody, welcome to this month's audio workshop. This week, I have a special treat for all you coffee drinkers out there. I have Michael Wakeman. He's the ex-owner of Cow and Bean Coffee Shop down in Dauphin Island. Right before going to engineering school, he trained probably harder than anybody in this area on how to brew, and just buy and everything that goes into coffee to an Excalibur level. Went up to Los Angeles and studied up there for a while, and just lots of different training there. So, Mike, you would agree you've got just a little bit of expertise in this area?
I know a little bit, not as much as some of the guys that I've met throughout the years, but I definitely feel like I'm confident when it comes to picking out a decent cup of coffee.
The good ones are always humble, so I can tell you I've learned a lot from Mike. In fact, when we went to Los Angeles, he told me we had to go to a place called Klatch Coffee, and at that point I was brewing nothing but Green Mountain coffee roasters, and so we drove an hour to get there and an hour to get back, and I haven't drank anything else since, so I definitely trust your palate on this one. So we're going to start off with the workshop by talking about the health benefits, or rather I should say the health debate about coffee, because everybody kind of goes back and forth on what's good and what's not good about coffee, and is it healthy, is it not healthy? I hear people say, well I gave up coffee, and then other people are like, well, hey, I love my coffee and it's good for you and all this kind of stuff. So let's talk about that first. Mike, I'm going to let you kind of start on that route. What's your take on coffee and the overall health components of it?
Like you said, though, there is a major debate, so nobody's definitively one way or the other, and to make a bold statement as it's great for you or it's not, I don't think you have any true leg to stand on. But I will say that I think drinking coffee in moderation doesn't seem to be harmful, and in fact I've read many beneficial effects. Some including things as disgusting as bowel movements, and others just with cognitive awareness and concentration, memory, and things like that.
I'll tell you, I'm definitely cognitively aware when I'm wired on coffee.
And there's a certain amount of coffee that I think one can take in and not get the tweaked or get the jitters. A lot of people don't know that standard coffee contains more caffeine actually than a shot of espresso. A shot of espresso has about 100 milligrams of caffeine in it, which is about the equivalent of Coca-Cola. A 5-ounce cup of coffee has about 200 milligrams of caffeine in it, so almost double. And green tea and stuff like that, just to give you an idea, if it's steeped between 3 and 5 minutes, has between 100 and 200 milligrams of caffeine.
Okay, now on that note, let's kind of talk about that for a second, because I know initially people are going to look at that and they're going to say, oh, you see caffeine in coffee is much higher, so I ought to go ahead and stick to my sodas, right? So of course, we kind of have to make the delineation there between what is naturally occurring caffeine and caffeine that is, made in a lab somewhere and stuck into an aluminum can, right?
Yeah, I mean, even with caffeine that's put in Coke, a lot of it is pushed out of the coffee bean again, and people don't know that. The extract for the caffeine is actually coming from the coffee bean once again. But it's highly processed, and a lot of things have been done to it. It's not as natural as you would get in coffee.
And, of course, you don't have the sugar to go along with it either, unless you're drinking a Frappuccino or something like that.
Right.
Okay, so on the, one thing that I know about caffeine that I have read articles about is that they say that it's actually good for skin cancer, that it can prevent skin cancer in again, moderate dosages. That's one thing that kind of blew me away when I saw that. What do you think in your experience? Have you seen anything like that, or what do you think you might attribute that to?
I know that coffee can be exfoliating. It can also stimulate tissue in the body. But caffeine through green tea can do that as well. So that's debatable once again. You can't definitively say one way or the other.
And now we're going to have people saying, see, my Diet Coke is actually, Diet Coke has caffeine, which is actually preventing skin cancer. Right?
No, but that's going the other extreme. I mean, Diet Coke, as we know, has aspartame and several other things that are not good for the body. So.
All the other junk in there.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So if you're going to let's say, because honestly, I'm going to tell you where I'm at. And a lot of my patients know as well that I like coffee. I love. In fact, like is an understatement. I love coffee. But I don't drink Folgers. I don't drink gas station coffee. I don't drink any of that kind of stuff. It has to be good connoisseur quality coffee. So if you're like that and you are going to drink coffee, let's talk about what are the things that you must absolutely look for if you're going to drink it safely.
Okay, you say safely. I mean, no, don't pour hot coffee on your lap like the lady at McDonald's, I guess. But things that come to mind as far as buying coffee, one thing is fair trade. If you believe that people should get paid for doing a good job or doing their work, then I would definitely look into fair trade coffee. It makes sure that farmers get paid a fair amount of money for the work that they put in, which is, believe me, harvesting coffee is major work. Another thing I would look at, if you're sensitive to caffeine, as I tend to be, because I've had bouts with anxiety attacks, and that's why I talk about the milligrams. A lot of people say the threshold for anxiety is between 100 and 200 milligrams, so that's why I kind of watch that level. And I drink decaf because I do love coffee as well. I would highly recommend going with the Swiss water process decaf instead of the regular traditional decaf, which is actually treated with a chemical called ethanol. Swiss water process is a process where they put coffee into what looks like a big grain hopper, and then they push forcibly water down on it and shove the caffeine out, which is a lot more natural than a chemical that's put on top of your beans. Another thing I would look at is going with gourmet coffee, and of course some of those things are labeled just like natural these days. You don't truthfully know whether they are gourmet or not. So if you can get it from a local shop, maybe that roasts their own, and you actually know what you're buying, because coffee sold on the commercial scale is on like an ABC scale, and the specialty growers buy coffee based on defects. They'll have 1 to 5 defects in order to be a specialty coffee. And a defect could be the husk isn't quite as large as it should be for that bean, or it has a little blemish on the side. But overall, the beans are in really good shape. Things that you really wouldn't even notice unless you stuck the beans underneath the microscope and you were a real connoisseur. But with grade A, B, and C, it could have been infested by bugs. The plant could have had a weak harvest, and those are typically what Folgers, Maxwell House, and I hate to name names, but companies like that will put into their coffee.
Right. And so one important point that you just put out there was know your source, and I think people are, you see an interesting trend happening now where. It used to be everybody was happy that they got away from farming, but now everybody is starting to say, hey, I think we're going to start growing our own garden in the backyard, because they're so worried about, we have to be worried about sourcing now because we don't know where stuff is really coming from. When you read reports from like Walmart, who, is selling products as organic, even though they only meet the minimum requirement of 25% organic, and stuff like that, you really have to be worried about the sourcing on it. So I think that's a huge point, is know where you're getting it from, check the quality, make sure they're reputable and not just trying to sell you a product for a profit. That's huge. Go to the guys who really love what they do,
Right.
Now let's talk about, on that note, let's talk about organic for a minute. For those that don't know organic, explain organic.
Organic means that the coffee is grown without any pesticides. It isn't treated with any harmful chemicals. The plants are left in their natural state to pretty much do what they're going to do. They encourage a lot of rich soils, worms in the soil, things like that. Trying as much as possible to hand weed instead of spray for weeds. So a lot of that is you're just not putting those extra harmful chemicals that are sprayed onto the fruit into your body.
Okay. Now, on that note, I do know this as well, right? That you have to use in a lot of these other countries where it's not regulated the amount of pesticides. I have heard before that coffee is one of the most pesticide-rich crops in the world. Is that true?
I wouldn't doubt that. I don't know that for a fact, so I wouldn't state that. But it is a very sweet berry. As a matter of fact, there's a special coffee called Kopi Luwak, which is actually a Sumatran grown coffee that's eaten by these cats, and they call them luwaks. They digest the berries, and then they excrete the berries, and the excrement's collected and it's washed. But the reason why the people seek this coffee is because supposedly the cats pick out the ripest fruit, and so it yields a really good cup. But I don't know if it's worth $600 a pound or whatever it is they charge for it.
And that one's got to be good for digestion, right? Because
right.
it's already pre-digested. Okay, so we talked about organic. We talked about the difference between decaf and what you need to really know about caffeine and all that. And I mean, on that note, just be wise about it, people. It's like, if you know that every time you drink a cup of coffee you get the jitters, then you probably ought to go decaf. On the other hand, myself included, I can drink a cup of coffee right before bed, and usually that's when I do get to drink coffee, is at night. It doesn't even keep me awake, so it's, it really doesn't affect me unless I drink more than one, say 6 or 8 ounce cup. So be smart about the caffeine content that you're getting. And you also got to look, even though it doesn't give you the jitters, if you're loading in, some people, they'll drink 2-liter jugs of Coca-Cola in a day, and that's a lot of caffeine. And I mean, just like any other drug, you are going to get accustomed to that caffeine after a while, and it's not really going to have an effect so much. And that's when people end up, right, they do the caffeine and they get hooked on it, and and it literally becomes a drug to them. Right there.
It's progressive. I mean, 1 to 2 cups is moderate, I believe, a day. That's reasonable. An 8 ounce cup now, not a 44 ounce thirst buster from Circle K. And it also depends upon how strong you're steeping your coffee. Typically, people in the industry for a half gallon will use anywhere from 3 1/4 ounces to 4 ounces of coffee per half gallon, which the average American is going to use 1 to 2 ounces. So that's really, really watered down.
Yeah. I had an experience with that at Clatch where it was like motor oil. It was incredibly thick.
You actually get used to it though, and when you start to taste the oils and different things in there, you tend to start enjoying it that way. I know it's strange. I
don't know if it was you or if it was somebody else, but told me where the Americano came from. Is because back in the war, the pilots, they would go in during World War II. They would go to the English coffee houses and ask for coffee, and when they bring them out, it would be too thick, so they'd ask to water it down. So it was basically espresso watered down, which is now we call that an Americano, and that's why.
I believe that's correct.
I thought that was pretty cool. So, okay, well, the next thing we're going to get into is we're going to be talking about the difference in the beans. What is it that we're looking for in a good bean? Because I mean, really, that's going to be kind of where it starts. Is do you have a good quality bean, or are you just kind of starting with junk?
Well, it depends upon if you're going to buy it pre-ground or if you're planning to roast it. Most people, I'm assuming, hearing this audio are probably going to buy it maybe whole bean at best. But what you want to look at is, do the beans look nice? If they're in there and they look all gnarly, like something you pull out of the ground, like a root, then they're probably not the highest quality beans. But if they're plump and they're round and they have nice oils on them, then they might have been treated with a little bit of TLC, as they say.
Now, this is just a question just to make sure, but coffee doesn't come in crystals, right?
Crystals? What do you mean?
Crystals, like you see some of this coffee that's is crystals, and they dissolve in your cup. That's not real coffee, right?
No, freeze dried coffee. No, actually, the way they make freeze dried coffee, because I looked that up. They take and grind coffee, and then they dehydrate it either in a freezer or something like that, and that's how it turns into dehydrated coffee. But that's about the worst.
They used to have, I don't know if they even have it anymore, but Folgers crystals. And it was
stuff they still have it. Taster's Choice.
Now they still have instant coffee too, like Starbucks, sells instant coffee, but that's just incredibly fine ground coffee, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay, so the beans, you want to look for something that is, of course, looks like a real bean and isn't all mashed up and pretty clean.
I mean,
Now,
preferably if you're going to buy coffee, if you really want to get good coffee, you'll know who's roasting it, when they roasted it, and coffee starts to get its real flavor notes about the 5th to the 7th day that it's roasted. Whenever we go to competition, we always try to get our coffee in that range for the competition. After about 21 days, it starts to spoil. Just like when you pull a ripe banana or a ripe piece of fruit off the vine, well, you've got 2 to 3 weeks to eat it at best from the time you get it out of your garden, put it in your fridge, and then eat it. Other than that, nothing lasts forever, as they say. And most of the commercial brands, if you look on there, they date them for a year. There's no way. You telling me an apple's going to be good for a year? Come on.
well, an organic apple, definitely not. But, but a pesticide-laden, genetically modified apple, I've seen that done.
Might happen.
I definitely wouldn't eat it though. So as far as the difference in the beans, okay, now obviously we see beans come from all over the place. Peru, Guatemala, Costa Rica. What is the difference in the different beans? Colombia seems to be one of the more popular ones. What's the difference in the beans? How do you know where to get good coffee from? Does it matter where, or is it, as far as altitude, longitude, all that kind of stuff?
Coffee actually originated from Ethiopia. Most people don't know that. Originally, it was discovered by a goat herder named Caldi, and his goats were out there eating the coffee beans off of the bush and doing basically backflips out in the front yard. And Caldi decided to go over there and try some of these beans, and they used to eat the berries, and then they would drink the syrup left in there. And after a while, people wanted to enjoy this in other places, so they got to where they would just pull the seeds out of the beans, and they would carry the beans and they'd roast them on an open pit on a fire. And that's how coffee came to be. And it was one of the kings or the princes of England that had come to the Americas and also wanted coffee in the new Americas. So they brought them over on ships, and they transplanted them in Brazil and some of the other Latin and South American countries. Coffee primarily grows best at 3,000 to 7,000 feet above sea level. And there's two different varieties. There's Robusto, which you actually can grow at sea level, but it's very dirty. A lot of people use that in their espresso or to make coffees that have a real heavy, muddy flavor. They'll use it just a little bit in there like a seasoning. But Arabica is typically what people drink or buy, and they buy the different, what are called varietals, Costa Rican, Peruvian, Brazilian, Guatemalan, and then you have what are called blends, like breakfast blend, which will be a lot of your brighter coffees, typically your Panamanian, your Brazil, your Costa Rican, and then you'll have like your night blend or your dark cup, which will be your Sumatra or something like that, because they have a heavier, full body flavor to them.
Okay, so let me get this right. It's all basically the same plant, kind of like a banana plant, but it just depends on where the banana is grown as
Correct.
far as the difference.
Altitude will decide whether it has a milder finish or not, the country that it's grown in. Typically, if you look on a map and you go down latitudinally, is that the lines that run horizontally around the globe?
I'm a chiropractor, darn it, not a geographer.
Okay. But as you start at the top, like say Mexican Chiapas, a very bright coffee, very acidic, very bright in the mouth. And as you come down, like you go to Guatemala, you come down to Costa Rica, and you keep coming down, the coffees actually get milder and more earthy flavored. Sumatra is a lot of people call it a dirty coffee, but it's very rich and bold. Whereas like your Ethiopian's sort of in the middle, which it's the mother plant, and then you go towards your Brazilians or your Panamanians, and you get brighter.
Okay, and the only state the only place in the United States that they grow coffee is in Hawaii, right?
In the United States,
Kona?
I want to say somebody else had another place they were growing it. I know they grow it in Jamaica as well, but in the United States, yeah, I think Hawaii is the only state.
Puerto Rico would qualify too, right?
Yeah, Puerto Rico would.
Okay, so now just something to clarify too. I mean, this is kind of a side note, but we talk about coffee as being beans. Is it a bean or is it a fruit?
It's both.
It's both.
It's actually both. It's like a cherry. It's kind of sweet. It definitely has caffeine in the fruit. But the pit is what you're actually roasting and then grinding and drinking.
Okay, so it's not the actual fleshy berry on the outside.
No, you take and you rinse the fruit. You actually they mash it. Some people mash it, or they'll put it out in a field and let it dry, and then they wash the beans and then they run them through conveyor belts and they sack them, and they're kind of a green color. Anybody that's interested in checking out what coffee beans look like, or if you want to get into roasting, Sweet Maria's is a good place. SweetMarias.com for buying green coffee for your own roasting.
Okay, all right. So let's get into that then on the aspect of roasting. Once the coffee has been roasted, what should the average person look for? I mean, what are the notes to? How do you know if it's roasted good or not?
That takes time and skill.
That's kind of like asking a good cigar.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't smoke, but
I really focused a lot on the brewing, having a coffee shop, and buying really great roasted beans. A person you might want to check out would be Coffee Clatch. You can Google it. I think it's called ClatchCoffee.com. ClatchRoasting.com. Yep. Mike Perry, he's one of the finest roasters in the country. In 2009, he was voted Micro Roaster of the Year, and he's a person that I used to buy a lot of coffee from. But just from spending time with Mike, who is also a chemical engineer, he actually uses heat transfer from chemical engineering to figure out how to roast his coffee. He takes it to that extreme. But there's a first crack and a second crack, and they occur at different temperatures. And I don't exactly remember where those are at. I want to say it's like 400 degrees is the first crack. And there's different timings. And the roast, most of the time it's called a mid-roast that they do on most of your specialty coffees. Now when they roast Folgers, it's a light roast. It's what's called a commercial roast. It's really underbaked. It's like taking a cake, putting it in the oven, and pulling it out 15 minutes while it's still raw in the center. That's kind of how you can equate it.
wow.
Whereas specialty roasters are at least going to make sure the cookies are baked, but they're still soft and gooey when you eat them. And then you have what's called Vienna or dark roast, which is where you just shy of burning it. Now, I mean, some people say you just burn it, but no, you don't. Real roasters will take it to the darkest that they can without destroying the bean completely.
A good example of that would be Clatch Coffee's French roast.
Or their espresso blend, which
right.
was #1 in the world in 2009.
I had a number of French roasts before. I mean, going to places like Panera and Starbucks, and I mean the places that are supposed to have good coffee. And I never liked the French roast because it always tastes like it's burnt. It has that actual burnt flavor, and so I was kind of hesitant to get their French roast, but it's actually my favorite. I mean, it's like. It's dark and you can smell the roast in it, but there is literally no burn to it.
Yeah, it's an art form. It's definitely an area that I was getting into at the end of my career in coffee, but I am very in the infant stage. If you want to buy coffee good on this side of the country, though, there's a guy named Randy, and I don't remember his last name, but he's in Homewood, Alabama, around Birmingham, and he has a company called Red Mountain. He's a very good roaster in this area. There's Counterculture up in the Midwest. There's a couple of companies down in Florida. You can ask Mike. Maybe I can give him references to those. And then, of course, there's Mike Perry on the West Coast. There's Zoka Coffee on the West Coast. There's another company called Cafe Vivace. And they're the ones who came up with how to draw the leaves on the top of espressos that you always see in the fancy coffee magazines. So they invented that.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned Counterculture. That's a coffee that, before I knew anything about, Clatch coffee or any of these other gourmet coffees, I happened to pick up a bag of Counterculture coffee from Fresh Market on Airport. And I mean, first bag, it was Mocha Java. And as soon as I opened it, I was like, whoa, this is totally different, because it ground almost like cardboard, like, pulpy, it wasn't like your typical coffee where you grind it and it's like little black chips. I mean,
Right.
it was like something that actually came out of the ground, out of the earth, and it was the best coffee I'd had to that point. So, very, very good coffee, and they sell it at Fresh Market.
And Intelligentsia is another one I'm thinking of. But yeah, the coffee should be sweet and aromatic. When you open it up, it shouldn't smell like old and stale. And over time, you get to where you can tell the difference. You'll open up and be like, that's spoiled. It's just rotten.
Funny story. Just on just to plump up Mike here for a minute. I had brought him a bag of coffee for something. Asked him to gauge a coffee that I had one night, and he opened the bag and he said you ground this with hazelnut, didn't you? And it didn't even get me until I remembered after he said that I actually ground it in the flavored coffee grinder at the store, and I didn't even pay attention to it. But yeah, so I definitely see you get that nose after a while. I was impressed after that point. Okay, so there's like a lot of different options as far as good coffees. Even Green Mountain coffee seemed to be fairly good. That was my preferred for a while until I really got good coffee from
They're
Platts
not
Coffee.
bad, they're just big.
Yeah.
And it's like that with a lot of companies. They start out really super good, and then they just grow to a level that they can't really keep up with, and then their quality starts to suffer.
Yeah.
And you see that. But I've taken cupping seminars with Green Mountain, so they're definitely key players. If you're really into coffee, Coffee Geek is another place you can check out, and Specialty Coffee Association of America. And that's where I met Green Mountain.
I know that wanting to give them props on one note is they actually became the coffee for McDonald's, which I was impressed by, because that was one of the first hints of quality I had seen out of McDonald's. So
Right.
of course, like you said, that quality may not be there anymore, and I can definitely tell the difference with the better stuff now. Okay, so getting into, now we're past the beans and the roasting. Now we get into the brewing. So what do we need to know about brewing?
Brewing, your typical pot from, wherever you buy it from, Bed Bath and Beyond, is not generally going to brew you the best cup of coffee. Coffee will release its oils at the optimum temperature of 198 to 204 degrees Fahrenheit. And I used to check my brewers religiously to try to get them in that range. That's where you get all the notes out of the coffee, and you don't over extract or under extract it. The time that the coffee should be in contact with the water is approximately 4 minutes. Now, the best way to do that, it's really hard to find a coffee pot that's going to do these things, is you can buy a tea kettle and boil water, or you can buy a coffee maker that has a single dispenser with hot water like Mike has, and actually brew it inside of a press pot and let the coffee steep for 4 minutes, and then press it and then put it in a cup.
By a press pot, you mean a what do they call them? What's the other name for them? I can't even think of the name of it. Press pots are the little thing with the plunger and the screen.
French press.
French press. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I
Bowden
know.
makes them, and I used to have a vacuum pot. I like those too. It has a top with a rubber gasket, and you push it on there, and the water boils up into there, steeps into it for 3 or 4 minutes, and then drops it back into the pot. It's kind of fun too when you have guests come over, because it's different generally.
What about my dad's preferred coffee maker is, I think they got it from Costa Rica, and it's basically a little piece of sackcloth that you hang over the cup, and you put the coffee grounds into it and just pour the hot water over the top of it.
It might work. It's just like I said, though, you've got to get it in that optimum range if you really want to get the oils and the extraction out of there, and that's
of course you
about
don't get
198.
very high brew time either.
Right, and 4 minutes is ideal. You start going over 5 minutes, and you start getting bitterness in there. And you go any less, and it gets a grassy flavor. Same thing if you don't put enough coffee in the coffee pot, or you put too much. It gets bitter tasting as you put too much in there. Some people are like, I like it that way. Well, it's like saying I like my house half finished.
Yeah.
Well, it's really pretty once you get it finished.
Or how about a steak? That would be
or
pretty
I like
good.
my steak sort of cooked. I
Yeah.
like to eat one half raw, but I like the other part cooked.
Yeah. Okay, so basically your typical option as far as the pots, not so good. I do want to add a couple of notes on there as far as the health benefits or lack thereof of using your typical pots. You get a cheap $30 coffee pot from from Bed Bath & Beyond or Sears or something like that. Just your typical store. Usually they're made of plastic,
Right.
and this is a container that you're putting hot scalding water into. And so you really got to make sure that you're using something that is glass, something that is steel, stainless steel, or cast iron. I don't know if they even make a cast iron coffee pot, or something that is, or at least BPA free plastic.
Right.
Because while they won't allow us to sell coffee cups anymore that have BPA plastic in them, it's kind of like the Starbucks thing. Starbucks won't use a BPA coffee cup, but the lids still use BPA coffee, BPA plastic. So every time you drink through the lid, you're filtering that hot fluid, that hot liquid through BPA plastic, which means you're absorbing all that stuff.
Right.
So that's obviously a big factor too. Is what kind of chemicals are getting in. Not necessarily, you may have organic beans, the best coffee out there. You're buying the fair trade organic, Klatch coffee we're talking about here tonight, using filtered water, and then you've got a cheap plastic coffee pot, then you're getting all that plastic byproduct in there.
Correct. And some other misnomers I wanted to clear up because I was thinking about it is a lot of people think you stick your coffee in the freezer to preserve it. That is one of the worst things you can do. Just put it in a regular cupboard at room temperature in a Ziploc bag or in a Ziploc container and keep it. And generally use it within 1 to 2 weeks. It's optimal at about 3 to 5 days and until about the 21st day or 30 days.
And now buying beans that are pre-ground, that's another thing too, right? Don't they stay better longer if you grind them yourself?
Yeah, you want to buy them whole bean if you can and grind it yourself.
Okay, so we were going to go through a little cupping experience here with some of these coffees that I had on hand. We had gone and picked up, had them shipped in a bunch of packages of Klatch coffee straight out of LA. And so we're going to brew each of these. We got explain this as you're doing it. What exactly we have here?
We're taking when you're doing cupping, generally the recommended amount is 2 tablespoons of ground coffee into a 6 to an 8 ounce glass. There's debate on that, of course, too. But the reason why I'm cupping with Mike tonight is so that he can taste the subtle differences in the different coffees. And he will notice as you go from Costa Rica, which I believe is our lightest one, and then we're going to go to Ethiopian, Peruvian, and finally Sumatra, which is generally a very earthy coffee.
And you can definitely tell the difference in the Sumatra as far as the color. It's already pitch black. Okay, and so what exactly are we looking for here?
When you get ready to cup, we'll let it steep for about 4 minutes, but you'll push back what's called the crust, and that's the coffee that sits on the top. You'll smell the aroma by pushing the spoon up backwards and smelling the coffee, sort of like when you're tasting wine, you smell the bouquet. And then you take a little bit of coffee off the top and you slurp it. And I know it's not one of those things that you're taught to do when you're a kid, but what it does is it aerates the coffee inside of your mouth so that you can taste it.
A lot of people are thinking, wow, this is fascinating. Something that I didn't know that I thought was just stunning when I heard it was, everybody knows that you go to wine tastings and stuff like that. Especially going out to California this last winter. That's wine country, and so you're walking around town and you're seeing all these wine tasting areas and people inside swirling cups and all that kind of stuff, and they talk about all the different notes in the wine. But I found out here recently that coffee actually has more notes of flavor than wine does. If I remember right, it was twice as many Have you heard?
I haven't
the
definitively
same?
heard twice as many, but I know that there are a lot of notes in coffee, just like wine. And actually, Mike Perry, that does coffee, was getting into wine back in 2005 when I was out to visit him. And I asked Mike, because I think he does have one of the finest palates in the country, or he wouldn't be winning Coffee of the Year many times over. And he said, basically, just drink whatever you like. Let your palate tell you what you like. Don't let somebody say, I've got to drink white wine with fish, or, drink what you like, but keep an open mind and say, well, if I'm drinking Thunderbird, am I willing to try out another kind? Or if I'm drinking Folgers, am I willing to try out Organic Fair Trade and see what it's all about? And give it a fair try, not just once, oh, it's expensive, I don't like it. But actually, try the coffee and see what people are raving about.
And personally, as a doctor, I would have to tell you, even if you like the Folgers better, you still need to go for organic fair trade coffee because it's not worth loading yourself full of. I mean, I know some people that drink literally 2 pitchers of coffee a day. And if you're drinking that much coffee, you would better make sure that you're drinking organic coffee because you're loading yourself with all kinds of toxins and everything. So, just do it right. If you're going to do it right.
I agree with Mike on that one.
Okay, so tell me what we're doing here as we go. Then are we at 4 minutes?
We're at 3 minutes and 46 seconds, unless somebody's been counting, but that's
Okay.
about where I'm at. But we're getting ready to try Costa Rican. What I'm going to have Mike do is actually push the coffee back with his spoon and lift the back side of it up and smell the bouquet. And maybe he'll tell notes in there, or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll say, okay, it smells like dirt, or I actually smell something in the coffee.
I just want to drink it.
Okay. Well, then you mix the top of the grains in. Take a little bit off the top.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell. You can smell that this one is very fruity. I mean, no doubt you can smell the fruit in it.
Take a little spoon and try not to get too many granules in your mouth, but. Costa Rican should be sort of bright. I don't know if it's
real
steeped
light
enough.
flavor.
Very
Real light
light.
flavor.
And that's what's difficult about cupping is you tend to get a lot of coffee grounds in your mouth when you're doing it. Yeah, that's definitely the lighter one. I'll let you go on down the line and try the different ones and see what you think.
Okay, so the next one here is Ethiopian. This one smells like goats. No, I'm just... This one has a lot more of a chocolate flavor to it, or a chocolate scent to it.
And yes, that's coffee we're sipping. It's not anything else.
They're like, listen to the interference on that audio track. Yeah, that one's definitely darker than...
Just trying to get the granules out of your mouth, though.
I guess maybe that's why people do wine. No granules, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then this one is the Peruvian. See, my nose just, between a lifetime of allergy problems and
Yeah, but you can really smell it in the Sumatran. You smell like a nut.
No doubt.
Wood smell.
As a child, I used so many steroid nasal sprays. I probably don't have much of my inside nostrils left. Yeah, these lighter roasts are really hard to tell the difference between.
Yeah, there are a lot of the same ones. If you want a real dichotomy, I probably would get like a Mexican Chiapas, which is really bright. And then I might get like a Costa Rican Tres Rios. And maybe a I probably would try an Ethiopian and then maybe a Sumatran, and that would give you a good
now,
cross section.
this Sumatra, this is from where the other three are from Klatch. The Sumatra is from Counterculture, and it really, you can tell a huge difference. But then again, it's this was pre-ground, so it's got a lot finer grounds to it. Which means it's chewy.
Yeah.
So if you actually eat the beans, you get more caffeine or less caffeine?
I would believe you get more. Yeah.
I'm personally a fan of the chocolate-covered espresso beans.
I like those too.
Of course, the sugar-free, not sugar-free, the no sugar added maltitol flavored chocolate ones. Those are the best.
And the ones that come out of New York are particularly good too.
New York coffee. Do they grow coffee in New York?
No, they don't.
I wouldn't think so.
But they have good chocolate coffee beans.
Okay, so you can definitely tell the difference in all the different kinds of coffee and everything. Now, as far as drinking the coffee, this is, I think, you'd have to agree probably from your past of running a coffee shop. Do you see most people drinking black coffee?
No, most people load it up with cream and sugar, and they try to hide the coffee as much as possible.
Okay.
And I think that's a lot of that is they've never had a really good cup of coffee, and maybe that's the way they've grown up. Mom and dad or grandma or whoever got them started on coffee always loaded it down with lots of cream and sugar.
Now, see, if somebody gave me a cup of Folgers, in order to choke it down, I would have to have cream and sugar, probably.
I would agree with you on that.
So now, of course, when you start adding in all these additional add-ins, the first one we got to talk about is the sweeteners. If you're using artificial sweeteners like aspartame and Splenda and those kind of artificial saccharin, which is
Right.
sweet and low, all these different things, you got to understand these are chemicals. They're not really foods. They're not something that grows in nature. They're chemicals. So what do you know about chemicals? Anytime you put a chemical into something hot or you heat it, it usually works that much stronger. So I think that's really big when we're talking about that, because I see people going, they'll put 3 packets of Splenda into 1 cup of coffee, and that just blows my mind.
And it's really not good for mental cognitive. It messes with your focus and a lot of things. When I put a little bit of sweetener in my cup, and Mike may say different, you may want to go with something else, but I like local organic raw honey, and I put that in my green tea occasionally. And I find it really helps with my allergies. Everybody else's noses start running, and they're on Claritin and all this other junk. I go home and I drink green tea, and the next day or two, my allergies are gone. And it's just strange how it works like that.
Now, do you put the honey in your coffee?
I typically don't put it in my coffee.
I was going to
But
say,
I will put it in my green tea, and I'm an avid green tea drinker these days. I drink decaffeinated coffee once or twice a week.
I love honey in tea. Absolutely. I've never had it in coffee, I don't think.
It might be interesting.
Now, we do use, on occasion, we'll use agave nectar in coffee,
Right.
though. That doesn't seem to have the same, real strong, pungent honey flavor. It's a very light sweetener, so that seems to be pretty good if you're using organic agave nectar. But that still is something that's going to affect your glycemic index. So somebody that has blood sugar issues, or even if they don't have blood sugar issues, but you're trying to cut down and eliminate your sugar, which is basically fat fertilizer, then you want to use something that doesn't affect it at all, which would be stevia or xylitol. Those would be the 2 main players there that I would recommend. Stevia is actually just a plant. It's a completely natural herb, grows right out of the ground, and it's naturally sweet. Xylitol is a sugar alcohol. It's actually very good for the teeth. Studies have shown that it actually prevents tooth decay. So there are very good options. And if we're going out somewhere, usually my wife carries around packets of the new natural stevia that we sell in the office. She'll actually carry those packets in her purse. So if you guys are the type that are going to be going out and about and needing sweetener for your iced tea with lunch or something like that, or out for coffee, pick up a box of those packets and bring those with you. Have them on hand. Keep them in your car, guys. Obviously, you don't have a purse, and I don't know if that's something you want to keep in your wallet. So just keep it in your car. And I don't think the heat of the car is necessarily going to really affect it dramatically, but those are kind of the keynotes on the sweeteners. And then as far as the creams, definitely talk about your take on the different creams and the different options there.
I myself will drink the coffee black if it's good enough. I never thought I would drink it black until I owned a coffee house, and I finally started having good coffee. I've always put a lot of cream in there, and I used to put sugar in there. Occasionally I will still put cream in there if somebody offers me a cup of Folgers and I just want to be hospitable. I'll drink a few ounces, to be nice.
Maybe that's my problem. I'm just rude. I'll just say I'm not drinking that.
Right. I prefer not to. A lot of times I will turn people down. But as far as milk goes, I also have some allergies with milk, so I don't drink a lot of milk these days. I found I'm okay with goat milk. I buy local Henrietta's goat milk. Very good to me. It's just about as good as regular milk. That Meilenberger's is not goat milk. It's something else. I don't know what that is. I tend to stay away from soy. I know when I first met Dr. Mike, I told him I didn't carry soy in my store for several reasons. And of course there's debate on soy also, but it is one of the most genetically modified crops out there. Without a doubt, you can look that up.
That's really quite an entertaining story. How Mike, here he is. He comes into my office as a patient. We're sitting there going through and talking about and he somehow tells me that he used to own a coffee shop, and I asked where, and he's like Cow and Bean down in Dauphin Island. I'm like, really? Where'd that place go? I love that place. What happened? And I had this immediate flashback to, having this conversation with him about soy. I had walked in, and this was at, back in my day when soy was kind of like the replacement for me. And we kind of debated back and forth about soy, and I walked out thinking, wow, who was that guy? He
probably thought I was a real jerk, but
I'm sure you thought the same.
No, I felt like I should educate people about soy. I mean, I found numerous articles on cranial shrinkage, which that doesn't sound good. I mean, the brain shrinking, and multiple cases of thyroid damage, which if you know anything about the thyroid, which I'm not a doctor, but I know that the thyroid does help to control metabolic rates and things like that, and people that have a damaged thyroid and tend to wind up getting heavy because their thyroid can't function. It doesn't function properly, so it doesn't regulate things in their body like it should.
Yeah, huge note there. I mean, we first of all, we were talking about the sweeteners in this webinar that just happened here for the month of April. You can get it actually from the Maximize Living website. Is on sweeteners, all the stuff about sweeteners that we just talked about. But next month in May, the webinar is going to be on soy, and it's going to cover all of what the research really shows about soy and all that, and kind of the guideline. From what we see is that soy in the traditional sense, from back the way that the Japanese actually harvested and ate it naturally, isn't so bad, but we just can't get that now. We just don't see that in our commercialized fashion, so when I'm walking in there asking for soy milk, it's like that's not the real thing, it's not the real deal, and it doesn't have the same benefits. Yeah, so since then, we don't really drink soy so much. I'll tell you though, I still am yet to find something that's as good in iced coffee as soy milk.
Goat milk. Love that goat milk.
In coffee?
Yeah.
I'll have to try that. I've never.
Henrietta's though. I don't recommend the Meilenbergers.
I've never tried that, but soy seems to be the West Soy unsweetened soy milk is like the only thing that I really actually like in iced coffee at this point. But I'll try the goat milk.
And some people can tolerate regular milk. I would say go organic. I don't drink it because, one, I have a mild allergy to it. I get really bad allergies with it. But the casein inside of it, they actually make wood glue out of milk.
Yep, they use casein to put the labels on beer bottles.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
I just don't want to drink glue, I guess.
Yep, it's liquid glue. Occasionally I like to use the creamers. Most of the time they now have the coconut milk creamer, and it seems to be a little bit better. It's from the brand So Delicious, and that seems to be pretty good. Occasionally, I'll get the twinge, and I've got to have some organic half and half, or the heavy whipping cream, and that just has a unique flavor. But again, I'm kind of like you. I'd prefer not to drink it if I don't have to all the time.
And we drink rice and almond and soy, or not soy, but rice, almond, and coconut milk. But to me, they're not that great in coffee. So my substitute is goat milk, and people will say, well, isn't it like cow's milk? Well, apparently the casein levels are a lot different in goat's milk. And if you, not to get on a religious spiel, but if you go back into the biblical text, a lot of people drank goat milk. Throughout the Bible.
Definitely. And usually, I mean, that's a big point there. Usually when it says land flowing with milk and honey, that's actually goat milk. That's not cow milk.
Right.
So, so on the another note, just kind of like a side note on the consumption end of it, some people drink, like I said, 2 pots of coffee, and they're like, well, we're supposed to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water per day, and I drink 2 pots of coffee, so I'm good. I'm getting the water, and yes, it's yes, you're actually getting the fluids, but you're going to be doing a lot better in the fluid end if it's actually water in the coffee, and it's not just loaded up, espresso on top of a giant glass of cow's milk or soy milk or something like that, which of course we know as a latte. But even on that sense, coffee is a mild diuretic, right?
It is, and it tends to dehydrate you some. So I've read 2 sides of the coin. So let's say some people say if they drink coffee 30 minutes or an hour before a workout, it gives them more invigoration, it gives them more energy, their workout's better. But at the same token, for every glass of coffee you drink, you probably need to drink 2 or 3 glasses of water in order to rehydrate the body. Properly. Yeah. I'm not a doctor again, but there is a doctor here with me.
No, that's definitely true. I'll find on a day, if I drink on an off day 2 cups of coffee, I just know by the middle of the day I'm gonna be thirsty. I'm gonna notice it, and I probably have spent multiple trips to the bathroom. So yeah, absolutely true. Any other final notes that we kind of missed on all this stuff as far as what people would need to know, in their coffee endeavors?
I hope we hit on all the high points. I know there's a lot more to learn. There's some good websites out there. I definitely would check out clashroasting.com. Sweet Maria's, if you want to get into roasting your own. They have a lot of stuff on different varieties. And we have a local roaster in town, Carpe Diem. I've worked with a lady, she's nice. I'm not going to say anything derogatory about her coffee. I personally don't buy a lot of coffee from there. But if you want to support local, that's an option too.
I definitely prefer the Carpe Diem over the Starbucks.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's definitely fresh, and you can tell it's newer. So, well, Mike, thank you again so much for doing this audio. And guys, I'm just going to real quickly summarize again kind of what we covered. If you're going to be drinking coffee, here's the big things that you want to look for. You want to moderate. Okay, meaning if you're going to drink coffee, that's fine, but do maybe 1 or 2 glasses a day. One other study that I did see that came out here recently, it actually showed something completely different. It showed that the more coffee people drank, it seemed to have a bigger effect on reducing the risk of diabetes. They showed that people that drank 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day actually had about a 50+% decreased risk of diabetes. And who knows where that comes from? That might come from the speed up of the metabolism, that their body's able to push through sugars faster. I don't know exactly where that's coming from, but the moral of the story I still hold down to, just knowing everything about physiology and everything that's there, is still try to be moderate as much as possible. So I would just stick to 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, and for the rest, you drink clean water. Just stick to the clean water, stick to the stuff that you know is good for you. If you're going to drink coffee, even at the 1 or 2 cups, make sure it's organic. Make sure that you're buying organic from someplace that they're actually not killing people in order to get the coffee. So buy the fair trade stuff. Get it from a reputable company that you can trust. Just because you buy a bag of coffee from Walmart or Sam's Club that says organic on the package doesn't necessarily mean it's a good product. So make sure that you're buying good product from good reputable companies that you can trust. Check your sources, and the best way to go about it is be loyal to it. Once you've got a good company, be loyal to it. Support them in that brand, and tell your friends and tell your neighbors about it. If you're gonna add anything to your coffee at all, try to keep it at a minimum. If you're gonna use creamers, try to stick to like coconut creamer or goat milk or something that's natural. If you have to have cream, make absolutely sure that it is organic liquid meat glue, not the non-organic commercialized, cows standing hooked up to machines with bleeding udders getting into your cup of coffee. That's not exactly a healthy way to go about it. So try to stay minimized there. As far as the sweeteners go, try to stay as natural as possible. Stevia, xylitol, agave nectar, raw cane sugar at the worst, but don't go anything beyond that. So there's a way that you can still enjoy some of your habits, not maybe all of your habits, but some of your habits you can still enjoy and do it safely without going without starting to break rules and everything. This is one of those definite territories. So I hope this is a little bit of education on you guys on this topic. This was actually requested many times to do and talk about coffee, and seems like kind of one of those niche categories, but there's so many coffee drinkers out there. When you look and see how big Starbucks is and some of these bigger chains, they're some of the top companies in the country because people drink so much coffee. So this definitely is going to be a contributing factor as a whole to the health of our country. So you can start right in your own home, make sure that you're doing the clean stuff, make sure you're doing the safe stuff. And in that, engaging every single one of your habits, health habits, you're making sure that you're living that maximized lifestyle. And of course, that encompassing in that is not just making sure that you're drinking clean coffee. Drinking clean coffee is not enough. You've got to be exercising. You've got to be detoxifying. You've got to be taking care of the system that controls all health, healing, and function, including metabolism of your entire body, which is the nerve system. So make sure you're covering all this ground, and keep the right mindset as you're moving forward, and you'll see your health just continue to transform and go to new heights. So go ahead.
On a final note, I was going to say too, there's a book that I used to use when I was in the coffee business. It's written by Kenneth Davids. It was written in 2001. It's called Coffee, A Guide to Buying, Brewing, and Enjoying. It's a $15 book. You probably can get it on Amazon for less than that. I'm not endorsing any of these products. I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody. But it's just good information that I found over the years of having a coffee house. And if you're interested, you can put it on your coffee table and you'll have a nice little book.
There you go. So, Mike, again, I appreciate it. I mean, this is a guy who, lives maximized living through and through, him and his family. And we appreciate you, and we appreciate what you do. And I miss your shop, and, whenever we're down on the island. But I have learned more about coffee than probably ever thought I would just by hanging out with this guy. So it's taken my connoisseurness to a whole new level.
And I've learned the value of chiropractic. So
all right, guys. Well, we'll catch you on the next audio. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for having us.